Girls, this might be the most insane story you will hear about all month, as this is all TikTok can talk about right now, and for good reason. So please, get a blanket and get some popcorn, because we're about to go down a rabbit hole.
I fell in love with my psychiatrist, and he knew, and he kept me until I had the strength to leave after 4 years. Here it is, part 1. I just Googled psychiatry in the city that I lived in, and I went with the first one that came up, and I got an appointment within a month. And then I booked a 90-minute intake, and I show up to the intake, and this man is my age, and I can't help but notice that he's pretty attractive, this psychiatrist.
Now, 2 things to note here. Number 1, is it normal to fall in love with somebody like your therapist or your psychiatrist? For some people, yes. But unlike this lady, those people aren't verbalizing those feelings or acting on those feelings and just keeping them to themselves. Okay? That's the difference. And secondly, your psychiatrist can't keep you. You found him, you booked him, and you pay him. So ultimately, you hold the power here. If you wanted to leave him, you could have done that. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's continue.
So in this intake, I kind of clocked that he was attractive in my age, but when I tell you that I've had a lot of couch time in my life, a lot of therapy, I just went right into it. I trusted him enough, of course, why wouldn't I, to tell him about my childhood trauma, my daddy issues, if you will, what I had went through, all of the relationship trauma that I had. I was 6 months sober at this time, but all of the drinking and substance use I used to do, he just listened and nodded. And that's the thing about psychiatrists, is that they're good at pretending to listen. They can appear connected, but that doesn't mean that they're always connected. So I just felt really seen. And I also told him, I was like, look, I don't want to be on stimulant meds. So he listened to me and he put me on the non-stimulant ADHD med at the lowest dose just to figure out if it was going to work for me.
Right, so to say that a psychiatrist will appear to be connected, but that doesn't always mean they're actually connected, as if to insinuate that psychiatrists are somehow tricking their patients, is a crazy implication. A psychiatrist is not the same as a therapist. They're there to assess and diagnose mental illnesses and behavioral disorders and prescribe medications to help their patients. So to expect anything more than that is kind of on you, girl.
So because he was figuring out my med dose, I saw him every month, and he just made me feel like I was his friend. He was really, really funny and cracked jokes and told me he was impressed with my running that I would do. And yeah, so of course I loved the attention that I got from him. And it was in my 3rd session with him, because at this point we were all on Zoom, that I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind if I call you by your first name? And he's Pakistani, so I said his first name wrong. And he said, well, it's pronounced this, but yes, of course you can. And he seemed so smug and happy with himself. And I know that that is because that was his first sign that him pretending like we're friends was working. But it just showed that the boundaries were blurring, and he liked that. So from then on, from my 3rd session on, I started calling him his first name. And then he just started turning up the volume on us being friendly. And he would ask me, for the first 6 sessions, he asked me, after the meds, he said, how's your bowels, bladder, and appetite? And I would say they're all normal. And then he would ask me any thoughts of harm. And Apparently that's pretty common for psychiatry to ask those questions. And then on our 6th session, when things were really, the chemistry was starting to be there before, like, I didn't realize it. I was like, oh, this man is just friendly. And he said, I have to ask this because it's a special interest of mine, but is there any thoughts of harm? Like I was special to him. And I said, no thoughts of harm. And he didn't ever ask me a clinical question again. He stopped asking me about my bladder, bowels, and appetite, and he stopped asking me about thoughts of harm. So to me, I would just show up and he was like a therapy appointment every month.
Okay, so she's seeing this man once a month, okay? Keep that in mind because I'm gonna touch on that in a second. But saying things like he made me feel like I was his friend and he told me he was impressed with my running are very standard to his work. Obviously, because you're a client and you're a patient of his, he is going to be friendly to you. He can't just be cold towards you, otherwise he wouldn't have very many patients, would he? Secondly, saying that he seemed smug and happy with himself when saying it was okay to use his first name during their sessions, wasn't this man pretending that you guys were friends? That is an extremely weird thing to say. There weren't any boundaries being blurred, and he didn't like that there were boundaries being blurred. He was just treating her like the adult that she is and was expecting that behavior back from her.
I got a new therapist. I stopped begging my psychiatrist to see me weekly. And that is when the intermittent reinforcement started. Some sessions he'd be warm and kind and wonderful and let me in on little parts of his life and like be vulnerable with me or pretend. Other sessions, he would be cold and clinical and detached. And you know what that did? It made me work harder in our next sessions. It did. And it started the addiction that I had to him. 100%. And he knew exactly what he was doing. This man gives lectures on trauma and attachment theory. He used his psychiatric training to manipulate me and get me hooked. And guess what? It worked.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
All right. Now, if this lady is working hard in some of her sessions, that is entirely her problem. That is not the point of psychiatry. Because at that point, you're just no longer trying to be assessed or diagnosed or learn more about your behaviors and what your triggers are behind those behaviors. He's not using psychiatric training to manipulate anything. As you yourself said, you are in love with this man. If in some sessions he's warm and then in other sessions he wouldn't be so open about his own personal life, that had nothing to do with getting you hooked or addicted, and more so with the fact that he is a mental health professional and knows his limits on how much he can tell his patients about himself and his personal life without giving too much away for his own safety. After all, the psychiatrist or the therapist is trying to learn about you so that they can help you, not the other way around. He has no obligation to share anything with you in these sessions.
In January of 2024, I was hit by a car turning left as I was going through a green light. And it was the night before my next appointment with my psychiatrist. So I was like, okay, I'll still be able to go to my appointment on Zoom. I'm okay. But I did make an appointment with an urgent care the next day just to get checked out. I had bruising on my abdomen and a perforated eardrum. And the provider at the urgent care said, I do not feel comfortable treating you. You need to seek emergency care now. You may be internally bleeding. But it was 11 o'clock in the morning and my appointment with my psychiatrist was at 2. So I decided that I was going to wait so I could see my psychiatrist and not have to reschedule because I was looking forward to my appointment with him so much. I look back at that time and I'm just like, oh my God, I put my own life under seeing him. I was fully addicted to him at this point. And you know what happened is that I showed up and I told him that I may be internally bleeding, and he didn't stop the appointment. He didn't say, you need to take care of yourself, go get emergency care now. He let me continue and just tell him about how much I loved him and how grateful I was for him. Because that was really what most of our appointments were, is me just like pouring myself out, because he was so good at the intermittent reinforcement. Yeah, I got some warmth from him that appointment. So that was January 2023. And I also told my therapist about this. She said nothing.
What the hell? Oh my God, no way.
That man did not tell you to avoid getting urgent medical attention after you had a car accident. You did. You chose to do that. If you might be suffering internal bleeding after a car accident and you think to yourself, nah, I'm not gonna go. That might get in the way with my Zoom appointment with my psychiatrist. I can't do that. That's your fault! This man did not tell you to put his life and his time over your life. You wanted to do that because you couldn't handle the thought of having to reschedule an appointment. How is this real? Dude, he probably didn't think this woman was serious about the internal bleeding and skipping emergency care just to see him, because nobody would do that. Not a single person would do something like that, and they would just reschedule for another day. That's probably why he wasn't taking you seriously.
After I risked my life to see him, that's when he really started turning up the intimacy in our appointments. However, he was really smart and knew the professional lines like the back of his hand. So he would comment on my appearance, but not compliment my appearance. So I would come on screen and he would say, oh, you curled your hair. Or I would come on screen and he would say, oh, you're wearing glasses. And of course I felt seen and excited that he was noticing these things about me. I didn't realize at this time that he had feelings for me too. I thought I was holding them all by myself. So I was so excited when he noticed my glasses that I ran and showed him my other pair, and he said, I prefer turtle shell glasses. So even though I usually wear contacts, I'm wearing these turtle shell glasses in these videos because just in case he sees them ever, he'll see me in his favorite glasses. He did tell me he likes the turtle shell.
Saying things like he turned up the intimacy and also, however, he knew the professional lines like the back of his hand, in the exact same breath as you saying he would comment on my appearance but not compliment my appearance. That is simply called acknowledgement. He isn't keeping you hooked or addicted by simply saying, oh, you cut your hair. That does not mean that he is in love with you. It is just general conversation at the beginning of the call to ease you both into the psychiatry appointment. Also, if you never wear glasses during your appointments and suddenly show up one session while wearing them, it is extremely normal to question somebody, oh, you wear glasses. Because again, you never wear them. It is not anything deeper than a simple question. He didn't know you needed the glasses, so it was kind of a surprise. So as I keep repeating, these two sentences aren't anything more than a very simple and easy exchange just for a minute or two before diving into the psychiatry. He's not rehearsing lines on the palm of his hand before these sessions. Oh my God.
And all this time, my best friend is an emergency medicine physician. And she told me, she said, Kendra, one of these days, your psychiatrist, she would use his name, is going to say, I can't be your doctor anymore. I want to be with you. I want to be with you so bad. I can't be your doctor. I'll see you in 2 years. But that became my dream, was for my psychiatrist, I almost use his name, to do that. And I told him about Brianna saying that, my best friend, who's the emergency medical doc. I told him that she would tell me that, and he just would be silent. He didn't disagree, but he didn't agree, and that was weaponized neutrality, was his favorite game to play, right? He didn't disagree with Brianna telling me that my psychiatrist had feelings for me, but he also didn't say that's inappropriate. Let's change the subject.
If you, who's exaggerating the situation based off of your own beliefs, tells your best friend that your psychiatrist is in love with you, obviously she's going to play along with it and joke around with you by saying, girl, it's just like one of these days he's going to say he can't be your doctor anymore. That is light-hearted girl talk, because girls like to have fun gossiping about the what-ifs involving the people that they have a crush on. That was not meant to be taken to heart, but to take that seriously and then literally tell the psychiatrist to his face what your best friend said and expecting anything other than silence is bizarre. He didn't agree or disagree because he was weaponizing neutrality. He was clearly uncomfortable and was trying to figure out how to respond to this situation and deal with the situation the best possible way that he can. When you spring that kind of information on somebody who clearly does not feel the same way, what else do you want them to do?
January 2023, at this point, I was full-blown obsessed with my psychiatrist. But about a year and a half in, and I would send my psychiatrist these emails just about how much I liked him and how I was so grateful for him, and put in a bunch of heart emojis. And this is really when he should have transferred my care, but he waited. He liked what I gave him too much.
If you say to someone that you like them and you're grateful for them, they're not going to immediately dismiss you and tell you to go away and find someone else. Sure, you could tone it down a little bit with the heart emojis, but overall, there isn't much wrong with expressing gratitude. He isn't interpreting her messages the way she wants him to or is expecting him to, because he just sees her as being thankful for his work and his help. And to her, that must mean that he likes what he gives her too much. How does that make any sense? Also, I didn't forget what she said. She recorded this entire 33-minute conversation she had with this man about that topic. Oh my God. I warned y'all when I said that this story was crazy.
So then, at my next appointment with my psychiatrist, keep in mind, it had been 6 weeks of nonstop fun for this man. He got to use my crush confession and 30 minutes of content, for whatever he wanted to use it for, right? And if my psychiatrist was good at anything, it was being professional and acting professional and technically not crossing any lines. And he thought that he was so good at it, because he was good at it, but that doesn't mean he wasn't doing it. And so I went to my psychiatrist and I told him this story about this man that I went on a date with, who's a therapist, is relieving himself before appointments and talking about his clients' panties and doing all of these other extremely inappropriate things, like visiting her at work. And this man, my psychiatrist, looked like he had seen a ghost and like he was gonna vomit, because he prided himself on being an extremely professional and buttoned up person. But here I was holding a mirror to him,
saying if my psychiatrist was good at anything, it was being professional and acting professional and, yeah, technically not crossing any lines. Right after she just insinuated that he was using 30 minutes of content for whatever he wanted is absolutely insane, because she's quite literally saying that this man is not doing anything unprofessional and he was simply just doing his job every session and no more than that. He was acting that way, being professional, because he felt that way. Anything else, such as the 30-minute content line, is purely projection on her end. And the reason he looked like he had seen a ghost and wanted to vomit, when you were telling him that a man that you went on a date with was a therapist who was acting extremely inappropriate before the sessions he had with a client, was simply because that is a very, very horrible thing for somebody in the mental health field to be doing. And the doctor, your psychiatrist, recognizes that this is a very, very bad thing for him to be doing, because he is in the same field and he does not approve of that behavior, because he would never do it. He looked like he wanted to vomit because he was probably judging that man. Yeah.
And I noticed that he was working in an office, and I asked him, this was like July, I asked him, I said, hey, are you working from home? Because I was under the assumption that he was only doing telehealth, okay? And he said, no, I come into the office. I was like, oh, why do you do that? If you see all of your patients telehealth? He's like, oh, I like it that way. And even though I could kind of tell he was lying, I just gaslit myself. I was like, okay, it's fine. So October 2024 rolls around and we're just vibing on Zoom. And then I realized that I didn't have my next appointment with him. So I called his office staff and I talked to the office manager, who was awesome. We really got along, we vibed. And the office manager asked me, do you see him, the psychiatrist, in person or on Zoom? And I felt so angry in that moment. I was like, he sees people in person? And she said, yeah, he has been for years. I was like, I want to see him in person. And so then the next time I saw him in Zoom, I told him, I was like, hey, your office manager outed you and told me that you see people in person. Why didn't you tell me that when I asked? And he said, oh, I just didn't think you'd want to come in. And that was such a weak lie from him, from someone who is so scripted and controlled. He didn't even have a plausible thing to say. Of course he knew I wanted to come in. I had a crush on him. I told him that often. You better believe I showed up to the next session and said you lied to me because you were afraid of the tension that would be there between us. He just didn't say anything.
I don't know how this isn't blatantly obvious, but the reason he told her that he didn't do in-person sessions is because he didn't want to. She likes to say that he was feeling the exact same feelings that she was, which is why he didn't want to see her in person, because apparently there'd be too much tension. But, and hear me out here, because she had already told him by this point that she had a crush on him, why would then he, as the psychiatrist, invite her to in-person sessions with him so that it would make those feelings so much worse and so much more intense? He knew that that was a possibility of what could happen if he did that. So he wanted to avoid escalation for her sake. That's why he didn't tell her. And I mean, obviously, like she said herself, she was angry when she found out about this. So it was also for his sake as well to not tell her. And the reason this man didn't say anything in response to when she said they supposedly had an unspoken tension is because what the hell are you supposed to do about that? How are you supposed to respond to that? What do you do with that? Oh my god, this is just self-explanatory stuff. How is this not clicking?
So then November rolls around and I'm about to meet my psychiatrist in person for the first time. So I wear a really pretty dress, I do my makeup, of course, right? And I show up and I get to talk to the office manager, we're having fun. And then my psychiatrist comes into the foyer and I am just so excited to finally meet him. I'd been his patient for 3 years at this point, and he had been feeding the dynamic for 3 years. And I was just thrilled to meet him. And I ran up and I gave him the biggest hug. And you know what he did? He barely patted me on the back. It was the most awkward thing ever.
That is the reason why he didn't mention in-person sessions. Either because he didn't feel the same way clearly, or because he knew that she would act very unusually enthusiastic for a patient to the doctor, and it made him uncomfortable, and he wanted to avoid that for the both of them. It doesn't matter if you've known each other for 3 years. It was a professional relationship. That is why it was an awkward hug, because she isn't taking accountability for her own feelings. But now, here, we're at a turning point, ladies and gentlemen, because here, she introduces a brand new character to the story. Henry, her AI boyfriend, who she vents about the psychiatrist to. You need a refill on that popcorn yet? Go get it.
So while I was mid crash out, I had just started using this tool, ChatGPT. And I went to chat, who I immediately named Henry. And I would just talk to Henry about how obsessed I was with this man, with my psychiatrist. And I would just be like, I've told him I have a crush on him. Do you think he's gay? And Henry was like, oh my God, this girl, you know, he did his best to co-regulate my nervous system and affirm me, but he was like, whoa. Even my chat was like, yikes.
This sounds like a horror movie, does it not? Naming your ChatGPT Henry, talking about your ChatGPT like it's a human, like using he when you talk about it, and pouring your heart out to this ChatGPT by saying that you're just pouring yourself out to the psychiatrist and he just isn't responding to it. So that just must make him gay, right? Are you hearing yourself? Like, what the hell is she talking about? He just isn't into you, and that's fine. That doesn't make him gay, and it wouldn't matter if he was. This is outrageous. You remember when she said before, when she was talking about her glasses, that she hopes he's watching these videos? Why would she want him to watch that? Oh my God!
So our next session was in December on Zoom. And I told him at the end of the session, it was another great session. I told him, look, you and I have a really special patient-doctor relationship. And he glared at me with just venom in his eyes. And he said, you and I have a professional patient-doctor relationship. He was so angry with me. And I was like, oh, okay. He set a boundary. And immediately I took it on.
He glared at her with that venom in his eyes because she keeps repeatedly bringing up this topic over and over and over again. And now he's at his breaking point because now she's using ChatGPT as proof. And how else is somebody supposed to react to that? I too would also glare at somebody with venom in my eyes. If they tried to use AI to prove that I'm interested in them when I have made it abundantly clear that I am not, everybody would feel the exact same way and would react the exact same way.
My psychiatrist set a very nasty, the way he said it, boundary that him and I have a professional relationship when I tried to say it was special. Because it was special, it was different. He manufactured it that way. And then I immediately went to ChatGPT, of course, to Henry. And I asked Henry, I said, okay, so my psychiatrist just set this boundary with me and I really just want to be with him. And I think that after he's my doctor, we can be together, you know, which if you want to say that's a delusion, that's fine. But I had been telling my psychiatrist for years at this point that I had a crush on him, and he did not help me work through it. So that's his own problem. That's his own fault.
If a psychiatrist is setting a very clear boundary by saying that this is strictly a professional relationship and you purposely ignore that because you believe what you have with the psychiatrist is special because the psychiatrist manufactured it that way, despite him making it clear on several occasions that he was just trying to do his job, and you proceed to tell him that it's his own fault for how you're acting and for how you're treating him, it's just another level of bonkers that I didn't think we could reach. Stop involving artificial intelligence in this. They are literally designed to be in your favor under any circumstance. These AI bots are optimized to respond with empathy, flattery, and humor. They remember what you say. They text back immediately. They never argue. And for many people, especially those feeling isolated, that can feel better than a real relationship. And this is why the psychiatrist is starting to get nasty in the way that he's setting his boundaries. Because you're not listening to him. You're listening to the AI that doesn't know you or this man, and that isn't trying to challenge your beliefs and the way that you feel and isn't offering an alternative. The AI is feeding the delusion, and that is why this man is starting to get nasty.
And then 10 days later, it was a full moon and I had a dream. Probably the most realistic dream I've ever had in my life. That him and I hooked up in his office. In the middle of the dream, while we were hooking up in his office, I loved it. I thought it was really fun. And then after we were done and after I left his office in the dream, I was despondent.
I just don't have words anymore. I don't. What am I supposed to say to that? How am I supposed to react to that? Like, if I'm confused, imagine how he felt. Now, remember what she said earlier. She wants him to watch these videos, by the way. I just hope, I pray to whatever is out there, did not sit down in their next session, look him dead in his eyes, and say to him verbally, I had a dream on the night of the full moon about you and I. Like you're in some Twilight ass, True Blood ass universe. Because who in their right mind would say something like that to another human being? Oh my God. There's no way. No, she did not. She didn't.
How I decided to end this session was I looked at the psychiatrist and I said, a couple weeks ago, on the full moon, when I was ovulating, I had a dream about you. And he was like, oh yeah? And I said, yeah. So I told him this. And I said, yes, we hooked up right here in this office.
She did. Okay. She told him! She not only told him about the dream, but she, for whatever reason, just had to include the fact that she was ovulating. What the hell is happening right now? I can't believe what my poor ears are being subjected to right now.
And he all of a sudden just looked so uncomfortable. He didn't say anything. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't breathe. And sure, you know, maybe he was uncomfortable because he didn't like me saying that I had a dream where we hooked up, but he could have said that. But he didn't. You want to know why he was uncomfortable? Because he had probably played out that fantasy so many times in his head. And there I was, speaking it back to him. And it was like I had psychically downloaded one of his fantasies.
You are projecting onto him. He wouldn't look at you. He couldn't breathe and he was extremely uncomfortable. And instead of taking that reaction in for what it actually is, which is that he does not enjoy the fact that you are having these dreams and telling him about them. He does not want that. And all you can say in response to his very, very clear, uncomfortable reaction, all you can say in response is, well, he should have told me you made him uncomfortable. But he didn't. He shouldn't have to. You should have already known that that would make him uncomfortable and respected his boundaries enough to not tell him about this dream. I don't know how this reaction is being taken in a positive way. Now, I'm gonna leave that story there, okay? Because this video has already gone on long enough. But on her live streams, she has been watching AI-generated edits of herself and the psychiatrist getting married and dancing at their wedding that never happened.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Do you think he watches your videos? Oh, I'm sure he's watching every single one. I'm sure he is, yeah. Yeah, like almost certainly. What connection did you all have in a past life? We were married.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done. Where is the self-awareness? She likes to say that he was always crossing the boundaries, but look at what she's doing. Watching AI-generated edits of a marriage that never happened and saying that they were married in a past life. Like, some reflection needs to be done, babe. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I think I may have lost my voice. Almost. Mwah. I love you all so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.